have 6:31. I don't know. We have Sandy, me, Yorgos.
Hey, Brian.
So we have a quorum. So is there a motion to open the meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second? Very good. We're gonna vote through board docs, Victoria?
Yes, it's opened up.
Perfect. Okay. All right. And then
I'm just waiting for Sandy, and Alex is not here yet. No, Alex.
Yeah, mine's not opening. Give me a second. I
Sure.
have to text Scott.
oh.
I didn't have that dog. I'm a yes, but I'm just not.
Okay, I'll take that verbally. So that is 6 yes, and I marked Alex not present at vote.
Okay.
Great. So now that the meeting's open, welcome to the August 3rd Sag Harbor School Board of Education meeting. For the record, the meeting is being live streamed tonight on YouTube. A link to that site is on our homepage. We did upgrade the ability of Zoom for the public to know. We can now have up to 500 participants in these meetings. So we do encourage public participation in these meetings moving forward. And with that, I would ask that everyone join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. With that, we're going to move to item 3.1, which is our first public input. I would ask, and just for the record, I see that we do have a lot of participants here this evening. If your question or comment is related to school opening or non-resident tuition, I would ask that you hold those comments till after the superintendent's presentation, at which point, if your question has not been answered or you're looking for further clarity, you will be provided the opportunity to ask those questions and receive answers. And with that, I would open it up to 3.1 for any public comment with those caveats. Scott?
I'm not seeing anybody with their hand raised. So I think we are, hold on one second. We might, nope, we're good.
All right. So with that, we're going to section 5 of tonight's agenda and turn it over to Mr. Nichols.
Thank you, Brian. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to provide an update on 3 issues: the Sag Harbor Learning Center, school opening, and new non-resident tuition. So I'll start with the Learning Center. The last real significant piece of work that needs to be done prior to that facility becoming available is the construction of a wall at the rear of the facility. The building itself is more than 99.5% done. We could essentially move in there right now. But the retaining wall in the back, our architects had indicated that that wall was vulnerable to further damage, and as a result, designed a remediation to address it. The district decided to move forward with that plan. And work started and was going very, very well until about a little less than 2 weeks ago, at which time, or around 2 weeks ago, a portion of the wall during the construction collapsed. And the collapse of that wall necessitated some additional work and a redesign, specifically with regard to the height of a specific part of the wall. So the district has been working with the architects and their structural engineers, and have been holding meetings with the neighbors whose property is adjacent to ours to form the necessary agreements for us to move forward with the construction. In the meantime, our contractor has moved forward with the majority of work that could be completed on our property. There is some excavation work on our neighbor's property that we're holding off on right now until we have an agreement in place. But big picture, it was a little bit of a setback in terms of timing. And we're hopeful that we can meet the timeline, which was originally September 1, for that wall to be completed. Any questions related to that before I move on to the second agenda item?
Are there any board member questions that anyone would like to ask?
Yes, thank you for the update, Jeff. Once the construction is complete, I don't remember, does there need to be an inspection of the wall by any third party before we can, we can have students and staff use the facility?
No, the design criteria that the architectural firm utilized has been reviewed and is sufficient. But pertinent to your question, there are some inspections that are going to take place by an outside inspector throughout this process.
Okay, terrific. And in terms of just opening that up for, theoretically for September, is there anything else that is a mitigating factor to that happening, or we're still confident that the building will be ready next month?
Pending the completion of the wall, we're confident it'll be ready.
Terrific, thank you.
Any other board questions? Any questions from the public with respect to item 5.1, the Sag Harbor Learning Center update? Scott,
I'm
anybody?
not seeing any.
Very good. Jeff, we can move to item 5.2 on tonight's agenda, please.
Okay, so the school reopening, since the last board meeting, the significant development is that we submitted our reopening plan to the state. And as per a previous update, the submittal to the state really entailed assurances on the part of the district that the plan would address A, B, C, D, specific assurances that we would address issues pertaining to health and safety. So that was submitted on Friday. In addition, we posted our plan to our district website. In our plan, in addition to the required elements, we identified 4 scenarios essentially for next year, that being 2020-21. And those 4 scenarios are from the most restrictive, we'll start on that side, would be entirely remote. Next would be K through 9 every day, 10 through 12 remote. And we heard from the community regarding that. A lot of people were upset with the 10 through 12 remote. A third scenario was K through 8 every day, with 9 through 12 in a hybrid scenario, where on Mondays and Tuesdays, essentially half of the 9 through 12 population would attend. Then on Thursdays and Fridays, the other half would attend. And Wednesdays would be a cleaning day and an all remote day. Option number 4, which we've since determined has some problems that are going to be tough to overcome as they relate to our allotment for the International Baccalaureate program, is a K through 9 scenario every day, where grade 10 would come every day, periods 1 through 4, and then 11 and 12 would come 6 through 9, with period 5 being a cleaning period. Tentatively, it looks as though the one that's gaining the most traction at this point would be the K through 8 everyday model with 9 through 12 hybrid, with the goal being that we're really going to finalize that by the middle of August 15th per se, And the thinking behind that is twofold. Number one, the governor is scheduled to come out with a definitive decision regarding school in the fall, and that's supposed to happen within the next week. And August 15th, if in fact the board commits to the September 14th being the first day for students to come to school, provides 1 month for families to weigh the facts and make a decision. I will say, and I'll preface it, and I've said this every time, and I'd like to say it again, that we should be very transparent with the public regarding the fact that if we do open schools, there will be an increase in infection rates and an increase in transmission rates. And that our job as a school district is to, number one, recognize that so we're transparent, but then number two, put everything we can in place to responsibly limit the exposure to the extent that we can to our students and the community. There are a couple of issues that have come up related to the reopening that I would like to touch upon during this segment. I'll start by saying that we're doing the best we can, along with other districts in New York State, to plan for every contingency. But if I were to say to the community that I essentially work for, that I have all the answers at this point would be misleading. I don't. We can reference the science. We can do the best we can to make decisions that we think are responsible. But to say that we've anticipated every possibility would, again, be misleading. A perfect example of this is the recent focus on temperature checks. So when the guidance came down from New York State, the Department of Health and the State Education Department regarding reopening, it was our read, Sag Harbor's read, and many other districts read that as suggesting that it was the responsibility of the districts to ensure that there were regular temperature checks, daily temperature checks, but that those temperature checks of both staff and students did not need to take place in the school. So in our planning, essentially where we've planned in our submission to the state to have parents fill out a daily questionnaire, and through a technology platform that will yield results to us, and anybody who has not filled out that questionnaire, that child, when they come to school, would be temperature checked before they come in. Since we made that decision, we've learned that some districts in New York State are opting to temperature check all students prior to coming to school each and every day. And the science suggests that that's not necessarily a prudent course. You could argue either side, saying that you should temperature check or you shouldn't. But the reality is that number one, if the schools choose to temperature check, there will be a big staffing impact. We're going to have to stagger arrival times because we can't have people congregating at the beginning of the day. And most importantly for me, because all the things I just mentioned we can address, including additional staffing costs if need be. Most importantly, the science suggests that temperature checking every student prior to entering each day is not necessarily recommended. So I've looked at the CDC, which said, they don't recommend it. If you look down just today or yesterday, Lee County down in Florida just recommended that they not do that. But in fairness to both sides of the argument, there are people on either side. So I'm providing this as an example so that I guess I'm shedding some light on the fact that some of the decisions the district is making or has made to date people will feel differently about whether or not that's the way to go. So I think that, as we go through the month of August, especially over the next 2 weeks or so, many of the issues that are included in the plan, not only in Sag Harbor, but in other school districts, are going to be discussed and perhaps will change, because nothing is set in stone. The other thing that I think is highly likely, and I've said this from the start, is that as we go through the month of August and we see other districts, not in New York State necessarily, but across the country open, I think what develops will inform what happens here in September. So if in other states, the reopening process goes well and you don't see a significant increase in infections and transmissions, that's good for New York. If in fact that's not the case, and you've seen some of that happen in Georgia and in Indiana, and time will tell in other states, but if that continues to happen in other states, particularly in states that don't have high transmission rates in the general population, I think you will see New York put some brakes on the notion of getting all students back to school in September. So that's sort of a summary with regard to where we're at with school reopening. I'm happy to answer any questions, I guess, to start from the Board of Education and then from the community after the board's done.
Thank you, Jeff. Are there any board members that have questions for Jeff at this time?
Yeah, Jeff, it's Yorgos. So is it set in stone right now about not taking temperatures at the school?
In our original plan, the recommendation was that we have the parents do the temperature checks. And that was based on some recommendations that I already referenced.
Yeah.
But certainly it's not set in stone. And if we decide to change strategies with regard to that, we certainly have time to do so.
I mean, my thought on it is like that we have to do it, and there's different ways we can do this. I don't believe it's something I brought up like in the last board meeting. There's a lot of parents that send their kids with a flu or fever like to school, and when they're not supposed to, and I think there needs to be like an extra layer of like protection for the students. So for me, like, looking at it for my kids and for everyone's kids, I think we should be taking it. And I think I understand what you're saying about then that we have to stagger the entrance of the student, into the school. But that's again something that maybe we should be doing it, because we can't have something with like the regular school year that all the kids are getting into the school at the same time. So for me, I'm more like a supporter of like that we have to take temperatures.
Okay.
Jeff, I have a question. I have a question. I have read the plans that I have read from other districts do have people get the kids temperature checked at school. I'm gonna just say that is also a concern of mine. I mean, parents send their kids to school when they're sick, so I don't know who's gonna be taking their temperature every morning, but I also know that that's not even.
You just broke up, Sandy.
We lost you for a second, Sandy. Let's give Sandy a minute to come
She's
back.
frozen.
While
Just-
we're waiting for Sandy, are there any other board
To
questions?
keep their kids home remote. What?
Quick question: have we looked maybe in getting those masks? You can walk.
Yorgos,
So-
give us 1
Oh.
second. Yorgos, we have Sandy back, so I just want Sandy to finish that question. You froze up for a moment, Sandy.
Yeah, I'm freezing up all night here. I don't know why. So my question is there are people that believe that if they don't send their kids to school, that they're going to be able to remotely have their children taught 5 days a week at home. Is that part of it if parents keep their children home?
So you're moving on from temperature check.
Right. Yeah, I had two questions there. Yeah, sorry.
Okay, so let me make sure I get to both. The temperature check issue, was there a question or a statement?
A little of both.
I
That
think
other
you missed it,
schools are
Sandy. You
doing it?
froze up.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
That other schools are doing it. I don't know why we wouldn't do it. But I don't think parents are going to be that conscientious to to check their kids the whole day, to check their kids every day for it. So I could go either way.
Okay, so the only thing I would ask is that, it's not even an ask, I would recommend is that before we decide to temperature check, that we do a thorough analysis of the recommendations from pediatric associations and the CDC,
I think that's fair.
and go from there, because I don't want to say that it's a bad idea, but at the same time, a balanced view of it suggests that it does give, quote, a false sense of security, temperature checks. And in many instances, when you look at how the virus is transmitted, a lot of people will be asymptomatic and be carriers and not have it, not register a temperature, or they'll be pre-symptomatic, if you will, be carriers, not have a fever, and that wouldn't register as well. So I don't want to dismiss it, because I think there are both sides. There are two sides to the argument, but we'll wrestle with that at our next task force meeting, which will be Thursday evening, at which point we can debate the issue and come forward with a recommendation.
Thank you.
Board. And then the second piece, I'm sorry, Sandy, because you broke up. What was your specific question with regard to the second?
So there's a lot of discussion, or people have a thought in their mind that if they choose to send children home, that their kids are going to be able to remote learn every day with our school versus a homeschooling if we're half in school. Like if a third grader has a full day at school, they can still keep their kids home and learn remotely, and that's our responsibility to do so. I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, let me try to shed a little light on that. So as of right now, I believe we have 10 families who've registered with the superintendent's office to homeschool during 2021. And that compares with 9 and 11, respectively, the two previous years. So there hasn't really been a significant change in homeschooling. What that suggests, and based upon the survey, as well, is that a significant portion of our parents will elect to not send their children to school, and as you say, under the belief that they'll be able to access a remote program.
Right.
And that remote program, we will have options for families, and it'll look different for students depending on their age and grade level. So at the elementary school, it'll be, Mr. Malone should speak to it, but I've talked to Jim Kinnear, who's the TASH president, and we're in the process of working out an agreement where many of the teachers could actively participate in Zoom settings, much like they did, or Google Hangout sessions rather, like they did last year. And again, the specifics of that will be worked out. At the middle school, high school level, there are some concerns that have been expressed not only by the Sag Harbor Teachers Association, but more importantly, NYSET in general, regarding the usage of the film or the video in an instructional lesson. So in other words, in Google Hangouts, is it permitted for a teacher's interaction with students to be live streamed? And at this point, we don't really have an answer with regard to that. What we do know that we can do is most definitely have the teacher's audio along with a visual prompt on a computer at the middle school, high school level. I will say that that the Teachers Association has been very proactive throughout this, going back to mid-March last year. So I feel confident that related to what other districts are doing, that we'll be in a relatively good position. But the details of that, I don't have the specifics of what we're going to be able to do with regard to video live streaming, specifically 6 through 12. And
I think just to clarify that, there is a remote option for parents that don't choose homeschooling, but don't want their kids to go to school. So there will be an online public education availability for this school year.
Correct. And I'm sorry if I didn't articulate that clearly. I got mired in the weeds a bit, but the form of what that takes still needs to be worked out. But there most definitely will be a remote option.
And just to clarify further, the issue, Jeff, that you have raised relates solely to situations where a teacher is both teaching live students in person and remote students at the same time. So that's only the situation that's only in a situation where students at Pearson are in school and their kids in the same class at home. So that's not going to apply to the elementary school. And it's also that issue that you raised also won't apply if the whole school is remote. So if Cuomo doesn't open the schools.
Yeah, and thank you, Brian and Jordana. I didn't do a great job of explaining it, but basically the concern now is with synchronous learning, specifically 6 through 12. So in other words, not even 6 through 12, because we're planning in a lot of these scenarios to have students in through grades 8 or 9, depending on the scenario. So we're really talking about synchronous learning where some students will be in school and I'll be taking physics, for instance, and the students at home who are on remote instruction will be viewing that same lesson. And the delivery of that model, the specifics of that model need to be worked out. And it's really some minor clarifications that we're working through with TASH, Teachers Association of Sag Harbor, that thankfully are not set in stone yet, whereas in other districts it already is. So in other districts, they've already made the decision for the remote option to be delivered through a third party, like iTutor or something like that. And in our district, thankfully, we have a relationship with our teachers where we're trying to work it through where we don't have to do that.
Sandy, do you have a follow-up to that, just to give you the opportunity, or if that answered your question?
My question's not answered, but I don't have a follow-up at this time, so thanks. Sorry.
Well, what piece of it did I not answer?
So what, if you're saying what I think you're saying, is it going then to be the kids that are in like high school remote learning, it's going to be similar to what they had last year?
Yes.
Because for me, that didn't really work. So.
Well, let me tell you the things that will be different. Number one, there'll be a bell schedule so that it's not going to be a situation 6 through 12, which is what you're referring to.
No, well, I didn't, well, yeah.
It sounds like you are, but maybe I'm wrong. It's not going to be a situation where it's, you know, meeting times are not mandated. It's going to be that if you are a remote student, you're going to be following a bell schedule, following the same schedule that a student who is attending Pearson would follow. So that's the first significant difference. The second significant difference is that grades are tentatively going to be issued 6 through 12. And we made the decision last year to not do that because the environment was new to everybody and we did not know how families were going to deal with COVID at that time, specifically with regard to work schedules. We had some students working, things like that. But now that we've had some time to adjust, we've made a decision that we will be issuing grades, which may play into student attendance and motivation, which segues into our third difference, which is that attendance will be taken in all classes, both in person and remote. So there'll be some accountability there. And then let me wrap up with saying, and I've said this from the start, that, and I think some parents have echoed this, that despite our best efforts, the remote learning program does not replicate the experience that students have in school every day. And I think we need to be honest that despite our best efforts moving forward, it still won't, but we'll just do the best we can.
Okay.
Brian, we do have an attendee who would like to speak whenever you're ready.
Yeah, as soon as we get through the board, is there any other board questions?
Yeah, I have a couple. Thank you. And I think it's helpful to talk through the different scenarios. In terms of the Pearson students who are opting to be schooled remotely, or those families are opting to be schooled remotely, even though we have in person, would their days just be different on the 2 days out of the 5 where students are in person, but the other 3 days when the in-person students are remote, they'd have the same remote? Right, because 3 days out of 5, your in-person students are remote. So I'm just wondering if those 3 days are the same and it's just the 2 days when they're in person that would be different.
Actually, so I may be misunderstanding your question, so correct me if I'm wrong. But if I'm a student and I'm attending school and I'm taking, for argument's sake, English 10, the student who is studying remotely will be following those 5 lessons, the 5 days throughout the week. And the 5 lessons that they will be following will be two with one group, 2 with another group, and 1 with both groups together. So the lessons, they'll be following exactly what the students in school would be experiencing. The difference being that the people in school or the students in school would have 2 days of instruction live and 3 days of remote. The students who are remote at the middle school, high school level would have 5 days of remote.
Right. No, I think that was the clarification I was looking for, that the 3 days remote where they overlap will be the same 3 days for them. It's just the 2 days where you have live versus 2 remote will be different. So 60% of the time,
Correct.
it will be the same. 40% of the time, it will be different. I think it's just helpful to kind of to spell that out. In terms of attendance taken remotely, I'm assuming that if there's a problem with a connection, there's some way in which we're going to address it. And if you have the majority of students in the high school are going to be in person 2 days a week, that there'll be some sort of protocols where those are the days in which you might have tests or other things like that, where it's easier to administer versus remote, just because I know some families have had problems with their internet connection. As these details get worked out and played out, I think it is helpful to expand on what we have online so people can read it and really understand what the experience is going to be. I think it's going to help families decide how they're going to move forward in September, if in fact we can go live. I just wanted to add that in terms of the temperature check, I thought you brought up some really good points, that it could give a false sense of kind of security. I do think, though, that even if it's a small percentage of time you're catching someone, a child or staff member, I would assume we would want it to do everyone that comes in the building, that even if it's just 10% of the time, 5% of the time that an individual may be carrying it, that they may have a fever, whatever that percentage is, if it adds another layer that allows us to identify sooner, then I think it's a precaution that we really need to consider committing to. I know Southampton and East Hampton's plans, they're doing the temperature checks, and I hear the other side of it. But I would echo that over the years, if you've had kids in the school, you know that there are times that parents will just send their kids off or not believe the kids when they say they're sick, or may leave early for work and not check their kid, whatever that is. So I think I'd rather err on the side of caution, even if it's adding another small percentage of capability.
Fair points.
Thank you.
I would just like, sorry.
Sorry, I'm just, Chris?
Yes?
And anything else? I'm sorry. I didn't know if you were finished. Okay. Susan, is it?
Yep. I would just like to echo what Chris just said about the temperature check, both going on the positive and negative side of that. I think that it's important that we do, if we can, figure out a way to do that. In the last week or two, going out and about and having certain things that need to be done, I have gotten that done. And I think that it's a sense of, comfort for some people. The other thing, it's not really a question, but more a comment I have about the bell schedule and the grades issued and the attendance. Just for a thought or something that the committee or you can think about is that, how is that going to be done? I'm sure you may have thought about that, but my thought process is mom leaves and she says, hey, Johnny, you have to do remote today. Make sure you're on those bell schedule. Bye-bye, Johnny. And then Johnny's like, yeah, mom. And then you know what Johnny's doing. So maybe, I just wanted, like I said, put a little bit of food for thought in your minds, which you may have already thought about, but that's just more of the, not question, but recommendation. That's all.
I think that makes good sense. Specifically, I'm commenting on the second part of what you talked about. And I think that as much as we want to return things to normal, which is the intent with trying to reintroduce some of these things to lend some structure to students, we have to be cognizant of the fact that this environment is not normal for families or for students, and that we have to, remain flexible while doing our best to establish a structure, and we'll do our best to balance that.
Yorgos, anything?
Yeah,
Mr.
so
Nichols?
on the temperature check, have we looked into the walkthrough devices?
We have. And actually, the research on those is that there's an awful lot of inaccuracies with those devices. I'm happy to bring it up again, but the research that I've read on them is that they're not all that accurate. And in fact, and this will come up in the committee, there are a lot of inaccuracies with regard to a lot of the sensors out there. And I don't want to make a grand conclusion, but at this point, from what I've read, they don't necessarily seem like a wise investment in terms of their accuracy versus their cost. Now, if you contrast that with what Chris said, we do have to balance it with, is it worth spending, X amount of dollars where we might pick up 2 or 3% more just by having them. And that's a decision that, the board can make.
Okay. And then just one other comment. So when I'm looking at the guidelines from the New York State Department of Health, the ones that they were issued July 13, over there meant that responsible parties must implement health screenings, including temperature checks of students, faculty, staff, and everyone else that enters into the school. And typically all individuals must have their temperature checked each day. So that's something like, that, it's in the guidelines,
Actually, I don't want to contradict you, but the New York State Council of School Superintendents actually came out with an update today that pretty much spoke to the inconsistencies in the state guidance, because the state guidance goes so far as to recognize, to in many instances recognize that it's not incumbent upon the districts to actually check the temperatures, but later in the document to say that they've implemented procedures and protocols that ensure it. So a lot of districts took that to mean that it would be a family-based initiative, if you will. So I think that the guidance itself, the initial read on the part of many districts was that it would be, the questionnaire would solve it. What we've since learned as we've been over is that some of the districts, especially out here, have decided to temperature check. And we're gonna have to see how that goes.
Brian, before we go out to the public, I just thought of one more question. Could I raise it before we?
Yeah, I was just going to ask if Jordana had a question.
I'm
and
sorry,
then,
of course, Jordana.
Go ahead.
Wanted to add that in my opinion, whether or not we're the ones doing the temperature check or the parents, they are going to be happening, or they're supposed to be happening. If we decide as a board we want temperature checks happening at the school in addition to parents doing it, that's fine. But I just want to make it clear that the questionnaires are still required. So no matter what, every single day, a parent has to fill out a questionnaire with respect to their children. So it's, has to do with, has anyone in your household been exposed to somebody with COVID, or there's a whole set of questions that I think it's every parent will have to fill in and staff member. So regardless of whether we're doing the temperature checks in school, there is going to be a moment every single morning where the parents have to be kind of taking that time to affirmatively respond. And it's only in a situation where a kid shows up to school and the parent did not fill out that questionnaire where the school then definitely has to take that extra step and definitely take the temperature and kind of, you know, take those extra steps. So Jeff, I don't know if you want to speak a little more about that, but I just wanted to, I think there was something missing there that I thought needed clarification.
Yeah, so the platform that when a parent fills out a questionnaire, we're working with our director of technology to have a readout go to the school nurse prior to the start of school. So we'll essentially have a list of students whose parents did not fill out the questionnaire, and those students will be checked for temperature prior to entering the building. So that was the original read of the document. And to go back to Yorgos's comment, unfortunately, throughout this COVID-19, I've said it from the start, but things change on a dime. So we thought we were operating, and we still think to a large extent, we're operating under the initial guidance from the state. But another example today, the governor said this weekend and indeed today that schools are expected to test for COVID, where in fact that's a direct contradiction to what was issued by the New York State Department of Health and the New York State Education Department in guidance issued on July 13th and July 16th. So again, it's like we're doing our best to adapt, but it seems like the playing field changes weekly, if not daily. So in the next couple of days, you'll read about this tomorrow in the papers, I'm sure, if you haven't already heard. But again, the governor stated today that the expectation is that schools are the ones that issue the COVID test, which is in direct contradiction to the previous guidance that says that we're supposed to be deferential and take our guidance from the New York State Department of Health.
And there hasn't been clarification as to who or how the school is performing that test, is my understanding. Is that correct?
Correct. Correct. And so
We'll have to wait for an update on that.
We'll have to wait for an update. But before we leave the temperature issue, to speak to, I think a couple of board members have addressed it now. We will bring it up Thursday night with the task force and note a couple of things. Number one, that there seems to be some support for the notion of taking temperatures, and that given that support, we should explore what it's going to look like if we were to implement that protocol at Pearson, attach a cost to it, attach a procedure so that the board can view it, and ultimately, if we have to change, we will.
Jeff, I would just ask you and Jordana, who are on the task force, when you guys meet Thursday, to bring that up, because I think it'd be good to get feedback from our nurses in the school who are part of that task force for our next update.
Yes.
And before we go to the public, Chris. Oh,
Sorry.
God bless you, Sandy.
Thank you. Sorry.
Chris?
This is a little bit in the weeds, but I think this is a question that a lot of folks have, and it has to do with the IB and AP classes and diploma. That if we go with the option where the high schoolers are, if they opt to go in person, are part-time in person and part-time remote, that we still feel like that we can have those offerings to some extent, and that they can still participate in that. And will there be labs for the science classes when they are actually in school? And if that's the case, then what do the students do that are remote, choose to be remote under those circumstances?
So you asked two different questions. So the first question, in scenario number 4, which was where 10th graders came in period 1 through 4, and then 11 and 12 came in period 6 through 9. That scenario presented a problem with our accumulation for the International Baccalaureate Organization. So the diploma candidates would be, unless there's additional guidance from the state, that's a big negative associated with that option. The College Board, which is the entity that administers the AP program, they don't have those similar hour requirements that IB has. So it's not as much of a concern. In scenario number 3, which was a K through 8 every day, 9 through 12 hybrid, the IB hour requirement would be met to the extent that those students would be studying 5 periods a week or 7.5 periods a week if they had a lab for the regular amount of time that they would if school was in session. So that's not an issue in that scenario. The second part of your question, what was it, Chris? I'm sorry.
Just about with the science classes for labs, just the practical nature of if you're in school versus if you're choosing to be remote.
So many districts are wrestling with that. We're awaiting guidance from the state, and I don't have an answer for that, because what you're referring to is that there is a lab hour requirement if a student is enrolled in a science course that culminates in a New York State Regents assessment. In order for the student to sit for the assessment, they have to have accumulated a certain number of lab hours. So for students who, I think what Chris is asking is for students who study remotely and are not in school, how do they satisfy that lab requirement?
Right.
So I'm anticipating that the state will come out with additional guidance, but absent that guidance, I don't have an answer at this point.
Okay, because it's determined by the state. We don't determine that as a district, just for,
Correct.
punctuate it. Thank you.
Okay, great. With that, I think we will open it up to the public. So Scott, if we could proceed with whoever has their hand up.
Yeah, the individual that wanted to speak does not appear to be in the meeting any longer.
Okay. I see a few hands popping up, so in any
All right,
order
hang on
that.
one second.
Yep.
Oh, I'm sorry, she is here. So first we have Diane Guido. Go ahead, Diane.
Hi, can you guys hear me? Can you guys
Yes,
hear
we
me?
can. Yes.
Hello, everybody. I just want to tell you how much I appreciate all your input and everything that you guys are doing. And I know that your backs are up against the wall and this is not a pretty situation, but I have some thoughts and I'll add some local color to this conversation. It's a little bit tedious. So I just want to talk.
Diane, I just want to remind you, you do have 3 minutes.
That's okay.
Okay.
I'm going to be quick. I've already made a decision about what we're going to do here. And I think the basic overriding thing is that if we're going by what the science says, the science is, as far as I'm concerned, the only thing that is for sure is that when these kids go to school, they're going to be exposed to the virus. And the reality for me is that, yes, all this protracted planning and all this stuff that has to do with procedures and all this, all bets are going to be off when we have an outbreak at the school. I mean, that's just the reality. And, I'm looking back to when this first happened and when the schools first closed. And yes, there was panic and there was disorientation. And my daughters, one of which is Marina, she's going to be a junior, and my daughter Nola is going to be entering high school. The disorientation and the discombobulation and all that happened then was about, not being prepared for it. I honestly think that if we prepared for a remote situation that was somehow normalized a little bit, that we would get a lot more out of this. It's sort of like, let's direct our energy towards making this remote situation the most normal and the most sort of seamless situation that we possibly can. I don't have much confidence, honestly, in this honor system of temperature checks. And I suppose then that becomes the question of, if somebody has a temperature, well then is that when we have to start relying on COVID testing? And where are those tests coming from? And how are we going to facilitate that when it's taking so long to get results? And then what happens if there's an outbreak at school? Then what? Are all bets off and everything's back to remote? This is what I'm concerned about. And obviously this is not forever, but the reality is that there's a risk. And, you know, it's a pretty significant risk too. So my whole thing is just about, you know, normalizing the remote situation as much as possible. And I love what Jeff said about, you know, making it a bell schedule and attendance being taken and grades being taken. And everybody in the country's in the same boat. It's not like our kids are the only ones that are going to fall behind in lab tests and, you know, science labs and all that kind of stuff. So that's my 2 cents. I just want to say that it's not about my lack of confidence in you. It's that this virus is very, very efficient. And that's that.
Thank you.
Okay, give me 1 second here to get back to the attendee list. Okay, so
Before we move on to the next one, I just want to say that as with everything with COVID, there seems to be 2 sides to every equation. So I do want to note that although we're supporting the notion of a bell schedule and bringing more structure to especially the 6 through 12 or 9 through 12 studies, those students who are remote, there is a downside to lending that structure to the extent that it will provide additional stressors for families who are not set up to deal with a bell schedule in a remote environment. So it's sort of a balancing act, and we've made the determination that we want to go forward with the bell schedule, but we're certainly cognizant that for some families, that's going to present a challenge.
Thank you, Jeff. Scott?
Okay, so next up we have Mitchell Brownstein.
Mitchell, can you hear us? Mitchell?
Yeah. Okay, I am muted. Can you hear me now?
Yep, just give us your name, not your address, please.
It's Mitchell Brownstein, and again, my question is pertaining to high school since my daughter's going to 12th grade. I don't know how many participants and board members and so forth attended the Sag Harbor Express online session this Friday, but it seems that most of the school districts in our area for high school are going to a hybrid, at least initially, program. Pretty much similar to our 2 days that students attend. Wednesday is sanitation or sterilization, and another 2 days live. So my first question is this. Jeff has mentioned that the students will be following a bell schedule, whether they're doing virtual or they're doing live. So is that a full day school schedule? And will that include classes other than academics?
I'll answer to the extent that I can, Mitchell, because there are some uncertainties out there. But yes, it will be a full day class schedule. The uncertainty out there with regard to the high school schedule pertains to the notion of cohorting. So if we're making a commitment to limit the number of interactions that students have with other students, then we're inherently limited in the way that we group students. So it is easier, and I've said this before, to cohort students kindergarten through grade 8, because for the most part, those students follow a very, very similar schedule. But beginning in grade 9 and then happening more in grades 10, 11, and 12, there's much more variability with regard to individual schedules. Those students can take electives, they can take IB, they can take AP, they could take courses that they couldn't normally take up through 9th grade. So the balance is allowing them to sit for those electives, whether they're in art, in music, technology, home and careers, elective offerings like War and Society, in social studies, marine biology and science, environmental systems and societies and science, those types of electives. The balance is providing the breadth of offerings while maintaining the cohort model that ensures or does the best we can to ensure that students are interacting with as few peers as possible during the day. And as with everything with COVID, we're going through this for the first time. So the model schedules that we've built thus far have scaled back the elective offerings, not entirely, but somewhat limited to try to achieve as much cohorting as we can. So that's the best answer I can give you at this point. And we'll see what happens.
Thanks, Jeff.
Okay, so next up we have Caitlin Diebold.
Hi, yes, thank you.
Hey, Caitlin, if you could just give us your name, not your address, and you have 3 minutes. How are you?
Hi, good. How are you, Brian?
Good.
Caitlin Diebold O'Connell. I have 2 sons who would be possible out of district students. We registered in January. And I know I listened in on the press webinar on last Thursday, and I know that it was mentioned that there are about 50 kids on that out of district wait list, and that we are indeed waiting. Unfortunately, that makes it a little confusing for us to do planning for other schools. And so I was just wondering, I know that everything is up in the air and you guys are doing an amazing job, and thank you so much for everything that you are doing. I'm just wondering if the wait looks like it's kind of soon that we might know, or if this is like we're not going to know till the day before school starts.
So thank you for asking the question, and I'm sorry that you're sort of in the situation you're in, but I think you're probably cognizant of our concern with social distancing and enrollment and
of course
the numbers. Where we stand right now is that kindergarten through, or pre-K through 5, we have 21 students who are on the list. In other words, our record of families that have made inquiries. And then from grades 6 through 12, we have 19, so 40 total. The tentative thinking at this point is that it's easier to accommodate the non-resident new tuition payers, grades 6 through 12, than it is pre-K through 5. Having said that, there may be variability even amongst the elementary grades. So depending on the numbers, you may be able to have flexibility in grades 3 and 4 where you might not have it in 5 to 1K and pre-K. And so in direct answer to your question, we're hoping to have some more definitive responses to families by August 15th, which is about, as I mentioned earlier, roughly 1 month before the first day of school for students. Ms. Carriero, Mr. Malone, and I have met multiple times and poured over the numbers, and we do that probably every other day just to see if there's an uptick. And with regard to our cohorting and maximizing class sizes at roughly 12, we have a much more comprehensive grasp of our abilities to absorb additional students. So again, I think that we'll be getting in touch with those families who are on the list, if you will, prior to August 15th and letting them know.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, so next up we have Heather Harshstein.
Hi, Heather. Can you hear us? Heather?
Heather, you're muted right now. If you want to talk, you have to unmute your mic.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, just give us your name, please, not your address.
Got it. Heather Harshstein.
You have 3 minutes.
Got it. Hello, everybody. I was here the last meeting and I had a few things to say. Superintendent Nichols, I have a question specifically if we could loop back to the discussion that referenced the video live streaming. Yeah. And I just want to make sure that I am understanding this appropriately, because 3 of the 4 options include remote, one of which is all remote. And from what the community says, even though this is not where my family stands, we want our kids back in school. But, you know, everybody keeps saying it's going to be all remote, all remote, all remote. Okay. Did I hear, I just want to make sure I heard this correctly, did I hear that in grades 6 through 12, that the video live streaming of the teachers, if it goes all remote, is going to be a possible issue? And are we looking at a possible audio only if it goes remote, or if there is remote? I just want to see if I misheard that.
Yeah, I think I didn't probably explain it correctly, so thank you for bringing it up.
Sure.
So if we're in an all remote environment, then it'll be very similar to last year, where teachers will be using video and audio to instruct students.
Okay.
And in fact, that's likely going to be the case at the elementary, even if we're not all remote. The concern that's been articulated throughout New York State is if it's called the synchronous learning model. So if students are in session and we're offering a live stream of that session, that's where we have an issue with live streaming interactions between teachers and students in class. But if it's all remote, we'll have the same freedoms that we had last year, although with more structure with a bell schedule and everything.
Okay, so in other words, the situation that you were describing with the issues with the live streaming sat inside of a scenario where some kids were inside the classroom and other.
Correct. Heather, you broke up, but yes, I think what you were saying, yes, to your.
So I think I could provide maybe some clarity on this. The position that the State Teachers Association is taking is that they're at this point unwilling to allow live streaming, Heather, or they're being negotiating with respect to live streaming synchronized learning.
That's correct, Brian. And I would say that NYSET hasn't come out with that official statement yet, NYSET being the governing body of the teacher bargaining units. But I think that a lot of districts are taking that stance, bargaining units, teacher bargaining units in districts. Thankfully, we have a very good relationship in Sag Harbor, and I think that we're going to be able to come to an agreement that serves our needs pretty well. Not perfect, but pretty well.
Thanks, Jeff. I think we lost Heather. Next, Scott.
Next up, we are going to go to Wendy Flanagan.
Hi, Wendy, can you hear us?
Hi, I've got the missus in the closet again. I've hijacked her account yet second week in a row.
If you could just give us your name and not your address, please.
Yep. Jay Flanagan. How are you? Thank you all for all your hard work. It's very much appreciated. A couple of quick things. Since it's the topic of the day, I would weigh in that testing must be done by the school. As my wife, the account owner here, is a teacher in a different district, counting on parents to be responsible for that sort of thing through all different socio-economical diversity is really a bridge too far. I just don't think we can expect that from the entire community as a whole, with an effort to keep the whole community safe. Secondly, I think the online bell schedule is a disaster in the waiting. I just don't think, I mean, I'm sitting here talking on a phone. I've got my my laptop next to me and I'm watching a ball game on the iPad. So that means that a kid who's weighing in is going to figure out a way around that faster than, it's not a challenge for them to do that. And again, I would just reiterate a point that I made last week, that the rules of the game have changed. So if our expectations are the same, I think we are setting ourselves up for failure. And I think we've got to just realign expectations. And I would implore you to consider just a schedule of consistency for the children, and something that involves them getting some physical activity as a very baseline bare minimum. The other thing that I was going to just ask, and maybe Jeff, you're more equipped to answer it than anybody is it possible, because the online schooling, as a father of a recent graduate and now somebody that's going into 10th grade, was really not all that great, and I'm being kind. As a district, do we have the opportunity to maybe spend the next 4 weeks honing our online program and really getting it dialed in so that it's very effective, or at least as effective as we can possibly get it? And then just say, let's propose having children come to school in October and letting other districts maybe be the guinea pigs and let them experience all the things that we're trying to avoid, and watch and pay attention and observe and take an intellectual view as to where they went wrong, where they went right, and maybe agree to open schools live in October. I think that serves two purposes. Again, to try to hone the online educational experience, which I don't think went very well in the spring, and that's understandable. But that would be a really great opportunity if we're next 4 weeks we're gearing towards that. And then, of course, if we can go live, having watched other schools succeed in that, we're prepared as well. Thank you very much again for all your hard work and time.
Thank you. Jeff, do you need some time and we can circle back to that, or do you want to address?
I can speak to it a little.
Okay.
Start with that the governor has been very specific with regard to the freedom that schools enjoy to close. So as per my comments at the last meeting, we're not permitted to make a unilateral decision to close schools. We are permitted to switch delivery models as long as some students are coming to school, but what we're not permitted to do is to put off the opening until October. That would not be permitted, at least as per the governor's guidance at this point, and that may change. With regard to Jay's comment about professional development, I think he's spot on, and you know, we're continuing to offer professional development to our teachers. We just, at the last board meeting, signed a contract with an outside provider that was set up by the gracious efforts of a community member who's going to come in and run a lot of tech professional development. We also have in-house professional development sessions that are running throughout the month of August. I think we just advertised it, I think it was last night. If it wasn't last night, it was the night before, and we've already got close to 30 people signed up, and we're hoping to get that number north of 60 or 70. And then lastly, we did make a decision at the last board meeting that we would not come back to school the Tuesday after Labor Day. And when I say we, the students would come back on September 14th, which would provide 4 additional superintendent's conference days, which are essentially professional development days, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday of that week, to do 2 things. Number 1, provide additional professional development with regard to online learning, remote learning, if you will, but also to address a lot of the organizational and procedural pieces that are going to be new for students coming back to school in September. And then lastly, it's not addressing Jay's question, but I should have mentioned it before, but analogous to a high school graduation this year where we weren't able to have a rehearsal because of social distancing and all those types of things, we will, in anticipation of students and families not knowing what school is going to be like in September, we will be sending out a series of videos throughout the month of August, informing families and doing educational pieces, both with regard to what the school protocols will be come September, but also some COVID-19 specific health guidance for families in terms of what they can do to better protect their children and the community.
Thank you, Jeff. Scott?
Okay, next up we have Lydia Dworkin.
Hi, Lydia, can you hear us? Lydia? I think we lost Lydia.
Okay, so we'll move on to Rachel D.
Hi, Rachel, can you hear us? You have to unmute, Rachel.
Hey, good evening. This is Michael D.
Hi, Michael. Can you just give us your name and not your address, please? And you have 3 minutes.
Sure, Michael D. I've got 3 questions. Brian, should I ask them all at the same time in the 3 minutes?
Yes, yes, please.
Okay. Following up on the issue of live streaming of classes, what does it mean that the New York teachers bargaining does not want to do the live streaming, if that's what I heard? Number 2, if live streaming is done, will there be a requirement for teachers to conduct the live streaming from school classrooms? And number 3, is there any talk at the state level of teachers being designated as essential workers? That's it.
Okay.
Jeff, if you know, Jeff, and if not, we might have to circle back.
So I'll start with number 3 with regard to essential workers. There's pretty detailed guidance related to previous executive orders regarding the designation of essential workers and percentages of the entire workforce that you can designate as such. So in order to really provide a comprehensive answer in that regard, I would have to go back and look at that guidance to see if it's changed, but I will do that. And I will get a response to you. You can email me directly at jnichols@sagharborschools.org, and I'll be in touch with regard to an answer. But again, the guidance all through the spring was that you could designate employees as essential workers, but you were limited by the percentage of the total workforce that you could designate as such. So that's question number 3. Question number 1, which was the question pertaining to NYSET. What I'm stating is that, and there's been no official statement from NYSET, but I think there are reservations with regard to teachers across New York State as it pertains to classes being live streamed where both students and teachers appear together. And those are the concerns that I'm aware of at this point. I found that out earlier today, although from our union, but I had heard other districts wrestling with those issues for the last couple of weeks, and hopefully we'll have greater clarity regarding what our model will look like moving forward. And then lastly, with regard to question number 2, which was, can we essentially, and maybe I'm paraphrasing or summarizing your question incorrectly, but I think you asked, can we mandate that they conduct live streaming? That would be something that I would consult with the attorney on, but I assume that that's a term and condition of employment, and as such is subject to bargaining between the district and the teachers union.
Okay. Yeah, Jeff, actually, the question was if there is an agreement to conduct live streaming,
okay,
will the teachers have the ability to conduct those classes in the classrooms at Pearson or other locations with the full use of facilities, while they're conducting the classes?
So the answer to that is yes. If there's an agreement between the district and the teachers union, there would be nothing prohibiting that from happening.
And would there be a mandate from the administration for the teachers to conduct the classes from their classrooms rather than at home?
Oh, so you're asking if we were in an entirely remote environment and there were no students in the school, would we be requiring teachers to come into school to teach their classes remotely? Is that your question?
Yeah, that's one aspect. Yes. So
yeah,
if things ended up in that position.
I think that the likely answer to that would be no, to the extent that if there is a determination that the environment is unsafe for students to be in session. In other words, infection rates are such that the governor determines that it's not safe for large groups to be together. I would think that that same lens would apply to the teachers and the staff, which would then suggest that they shouldn't be coming in either, just like last spring, which then perhaps segues into your third question, which was, we have to designate them as essential employees.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, which I've already touched upon. And I can get you more information on that in the next day or two.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, so next up we have Allison Norris.
Okay, Allison, unmute yourself. Oh,
Yep. Hi, thanks for taking.
Allison, just give us your name only, not your address. Then you have 3 minutes. Allison?
Go ahead, Allison.
Hi. I just had one question. At the last meeting, it was suggested that if somebody does become ill, whether it's a student or faculty member, the school is not notified. It goes to the Department of Health. Can somebody just elaborate on that? Because it was not clear to me at the last meeting. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. And I think it's a very good question. Where it's left as per the guidance that was issued on July 13th and July 16th, and that was from, in order, the Department of Health and then the New York State Education Department. One document was roughly 25 pages, the other one was 145 pages. They were very clear in both of those documents that we're supposed, when I say we, school districts are supposed to take their guidance from the Department of Health, and that the Department of Health is supposed to guide us in terms of notification and really take over, and also with regard to contact tracing. So let's say, for argument's sake, we had a case in Sag Harbor, we would notify the Department of Health if they were not already notified, and then they would take care of notifying the parents, school community, and also take care or address contact tracing. Now, what I had said during the last board meeting was that I'd like to think things are different than they were back in April. But in April of last year, when we had a case of COVID or multiple cases after we shut school, when I called the Department of Health to inquire as to notification to the school community, the response I got at that time was, we're backlogged, we're overloaded, you really got to deal with this on your own. So they weren't really much of a help last April. I'm hopeful that with the last 4 or 5 months or 3 or 4 months, whatever it is, that they're better equipped to provide the guidance that the 2 documents I just referenced suggest that they're supposed to. And just to add an additional piece, someone might say, well, what's logical about the school district not taking ownership of that notification role? And part of the rationale behind the school district being limited in its communication endeavors is pertain to privacy issues with regard to families and students. So a school district, as per guidance we've received from our council and the Department of Health and the New York State Education Department, can't go communicate private information. That's best left to the Department of Health.
Next up, we have Thomas McMurray.
Tom, please give us your name, not your address, and you have 3 minutes.
Thomas McGurlin.
You don't have to use all 3 if you don't want to.
Oh, no, I don't. Number one, I think the most important thing that I've been hearing the last few meetings, Jeff, thank you for setting the context every week that things can always change on a dime. I think that's really important to hear, and I'm sure they will. little concerned about the temperature taking. So it raised a question in my mind because I'm finishing up putting my fourth child through the school. He's going to be a senior, and it seems like the beginning of every year, that first month, either the kids get sick or they'll bring something home to me. I remember having strep throat like 3 years in a row the first couple of weeks of school. Is there any data that you have, Jeff, that's available, like for the first 4 to 5 weeks of the school year, when all the kids return?
I don't, in answer to your question, Tom, I don't have specific, I probably could dig it up for sure because I have absentee records.
Right.
Here through the student management system. But I think what you're touching upon, and probably intentionally, is that part of the criticism, if you will, or part of the reservations that some of the medical societies and journals have with regard to schools taking temperature checks is that the temperature checks don't necessarily represent COVID. So if you have a check that yielded 100 degrees, I think it's 100 degrees, and in other parts of the world, it's 100.4. You could be excluding a student out for something other than COVID, to which someone would say, hey, that's a reasonable accommodation or a reasonable compromise to make because we're dealing with such a significant health risk. But it is one of the significant criticisms of temperature checks is that the temperature, a high temperature doesn't necessarily mean COVID, and then you're excluding a student out. But regardless of whether the district does that or not, even if it's self-reported by a family, the guidance suggests that then the student stays out of school out of an abundance of caution for an extended period of time. And so if we don't temperature check, let's say that's something that a family reports that a student has a fever of 100 or above, then the guidelines from the Department of Health and the CDC kick in, which necessitate that the students stay out of school for a specified amount of time. So I think I see your point, but at the same time, it's sort of a situation where the plan is being given to us.
Are you frozen? Are you frozen?
We can hear you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I'm just a little nervous that, you might have a little spike right at the beginning of the year and everybody's going to get nervous. And, if I'm not, I think I'm correct in saying that you have to be fever free for 24 hours before returning to school. So,
I think it's longer. I think it's longer than that, Tom.
Right.
Yeah, I think if you have a fever, the amount of time that you have to stay out, if you want to email me tomorrow, I can get you that information, but it's longer than 24 hours.
Okay. And one more question, Jeff. I'm hearing this date of September 21st for sports, but I am aware that not so much Section 11, but the governing body of all the sections, it's the NYS, it's got all those letters in it.
High school.
Have you heard anything on any kind of sports related things like?
I have not. I have heard that September 21, as you just stated, is a date that they will make an announcement regarding fall sports. But the New York State Public High School Athletic Association, I haven't read anything beyond that from them.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Tom. Sandy, I saw you waving. Would you like to add
Yeah,
something?
I just have to say that I got an email on that today. They're delaying fall sports until Monday, September 21st, canceling fall and regional state championships, waive 7-day practice rule, maintain current practice requirements, encourage geographic scheduling for games and contests, and schools would have the option, if permitted by state officials, to offer off-season conditioning and workouts. Just came out today. So it's the 21st.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so next up, we would have Rod Richardson.
Rod, can you hear us? Please unmute yourself.
Yes, hi.
Just state your full name for the record. Do not give us your address.
Rod Richardson.
Okay, you have 3 minutes, please.
Sure. I just wanted to ask, whether you guys might be willing to consider later start times. Since there will be no or very little intercollegiate sports this fall, by all indications so far, there appears that there will be very little reason for an early start time for school, since that was the reason that I'd understood we had to start school so early. A later start time, would be much more consistent with students being well rested, healthy, and in good emotional spirits. So very likely, we could expect maybe students and educators would have stronger immune systems if they had more sleep. So could we consider a later start time this fall to keep the kids healthy and in good spirits and maybe lessen infection rates?
You want me to address that, Brian?
If you can, please.
Yeah, I'm probably not comprehensively, but I do think that any change to the workday, we would have to work through with the contractual obligations that we have or the existing contract we have to see if we could do that. Mr. Richardson makes some good points. There are other considerations in there as well regarding family schedules and things like that that I'd want to thoroughly investigate before changing anything. But I'm happy to bring it up with some bargaining units and see what their thoughts are.
Thank you. I'd appreciate that.
Great, thank you. Scott?
Okay, so we're going to move on to Kate Mcmanus.
Hi, how are you? Hi, my
Hi,
name.
Kate, can you just give us your full name, not your address, and then you have 3 minutes.
Okay, my name is Kate Mcmanus. I want to thank you all for tackling this. I am glad I'm not in your shoes. I do have a few questions, though. All of my questions pertain to if school is in session, and some of my questions would be about the children in school, and some of them are about the children that would be remote learning while school is in session. So in middle school, will the middle school remote learner be able to participate in the class or just view or listen to the class? So will they actually be able to participate somehow? And how would that happen? Should I just go through all my questions?
Yeah, yes, please. I'll ask all of them.
Okay.
Yep.
And then, so I'm going to use my third grader going into third grade as an example here. So last year she had 20 kids in her class. There were 3 classes. So I'm assuming about 60 kids in the grade, which would make roughly 5 classes now if there are 12 kids in class, depending on new students or kids remote learning. So I'm assuming each grade is going to have more classes. So where are the extra teachers coming from? So if my student now is in a class, who's her teacher? Are the teachers sharing like different classes? And that takes me to another question is how many different teachers will come into my student's room in a day who have also been into other classes? Because obviously that's endangering the teachers, and if a kid in one class is sick, now other kids might get sick through the teacher. And then in elementary school, who will run the remote learning program? If school is on, will it be the elementary school teachers, like the regular classroom teachers, or will there be teachers that designated strictly for remote learning? So those are my questions.
Okay, Jeff, if you could take a stab at them, please.
I'll try to go through them.
And then if Matt,
Yeah, I'll draw on, Matt and I have had some discussion, but if I get stuck, I'll ask him to chime in. So your first question with regard to middle school, and it also pertains to high school, is if a student elects to be remote, what will be their level of participation in the classes that are taking place in the school? And so the question is, can the students who are on the remote program actively participate with the class that's in live time? And the answer to that question is we're going to be looking for ways to make that happen. It may be achieved really through two different methods. Number one is additional training to structure a class in such a way that you can make that happen. So it may be that every 5 to 10 minutes, the teacher pauses and says, now who has a question? And the teacher looks at the Google Hangout questions that are posted on chat, as well as what's happening in the classroom. My guess is that it's also going to require some additional staff as well, so that in addition to the teacher teaching the class, you might have to have a TA in there in the class to be coordinating the question and answer portion, so that the teacher doesn't have to multitask and take away from their instructional delivery. But I talked a lot, but the answer is that we're going to be looking for ways to make it as accessible as possible to those students who are studying remotely, if they choose to do that. The second question is really talked about class sizes at the elementary level. So if you had a class size of 60 and you were typically broken into, as you suggested, 3 groups of 20, now you'd have 5 groups or 5 sections of 12. But one of the things that the survey pointed out and is that roughly 1/3 of our students have indicated that they would elect to go remote. So if in fact that's true, then your 60 becomes 40, and your 40 gets divided into groups of 12. So you might have 3 or 4 sections rather than 5. And then taking your question, your next question is, how do you accommodate or address the increased need for teachers, even given that 33% reduction in school population, if the survey is correct? And the answer is that you have to, or we will have to, repurpose teachers. So in certain situations, we might not have the elective offerings that we would normally have. So teachers who maybe taught, computers or phys ed, or, well, phys ed might be a bad example, but library or whatever may be redeployed to assist with some of those increases in instructional needs. Mr. Malone, do you want to add to the last part of my answer there?
Mr. Nichols, I think you answered that very well. One additional point, I think, just to follow up on Ms. Mcmanus's comment with regards to just the structure and setup at the elementary school in particular. Our real focus with bringing the kids back in, as we've been saying, and this is not going to change, is going to be everyone's health and safety, and doing our best to mitigate the risk as best we can. So therefore, we will be looking to limit the interaction and movement between the teachers and the students to the best of our ability. So we're going to be cohorting the students in the small groups of 12. There will be some times where, aside from the lead of the classroom, that additional teachers may have to move into the building. But in our planning, we are looking to limit that to the best of our abilities.
All right, thank you both.
Okay, next up we have Rochelle Hunt.
Hi, Rochelle. You can unmute yourself, please. Just state your full name. Don't give us your address, and you have 3 minutes.
Hi, this is Mr. Romano and Rochelle Romano. How you guys doing tonight?
Good. How are you?
Good, good, good. I'd just like to comment on what a parent said earlier about possibly starting school a little bit later. Research does show that kids perform much better when they start a little later and they're well rested, but that's just to add to that point earlier. My main question is, could you explain exactly how the testing works? So if I go to school and I'm assuming I'm a student, I test positive, what is the exact protocol for that whole process? I still don't really understand it.
So what would happen is, if you came to school and you tested positive, are you saying tested positive for a higher temperature?
For COVID.
Schools at this point are not testing for COVID. So maybe I'm misunderstanding your question.
Okay,
So-
how do we deal with that whole process of testing or not testing to just protect, everybody? I'm really still in the dark about that.
Yeah, as am I a little bit, because
Okay,
again,
I figured that, no problem. Okay.
we were operating under the assumption up until today that schools would not be involved in any COVID testing. And as I said at the beginning of the meeting, the governor came out and made some comments on Saturday and then held a press conference today, predicting all the guidance that's been issued to date, which had suggested that all COVID testing would be handled by, doctors and health agencies, not the school. So let me get to maybe a little bit of your question indirectly, which is, what are the protocols in place should a student exhibit symptoms of COVID-19 while in school, including a cough, a fever, anything that the nurse or a teacher thinks places the student or makes it they're suffering from COVID. So each school has to identify a separate COVID room. So if in fact a student exhibits symptoms, that student would be isolated. They'd be escorted to a room where an adult would stay a safe distance away from them with personal protective gear. And they would remain with the student until the parent arrives at the school to pick the student up. Once the student leaves, he or she is subject to minimum amounts of time that they would not be permitted to return to school. And if you look at our plan online, it gets into the specificity of what the requirements are to return to school. And those requirements are not requirements that the Sag Harbor Schools came up with. They're requirements that came directly from the Department of Health and CDC.
Okay.
That's pretty much an overview of everything but the COVID testing, which you started with.
Okay, I appreciate that response. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And before we go to the next person, Jeff and Matt, I just see posted in the comments, Kate Mcmanus just asked for clarity as to who will run the remote learning program for the elementary school.
Mr. Malone, do you want to tackle that?
Sure, happy to. I think as Mr. Nichols indicated a moment ago, we have been looking at the preliminary data from the survey that went out. And based on that, we're led to believe that we would be designating teachers to actually be the point people, for example, at a specific grade level, to run those remote classes or sections.
Very good. And obviously for the public, overseen by Mr. Malone, the building principal.
That is correct.
Just to clarify for someone else watching, Matt. Thank you.
No, good point.
Okay, Scott.
And next up, we have Helen Rousseau.
Hi, Helen. You can unmute yourself. Please give us your full name, and you have 3 minutes.
Hi, it's Helen Rousseau here. Thank you, everybody, and thanks for all the questions. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. Well, what I was going to say, I was listening earlier on, and I'm a little bit concerned, to be honest, about just the 4 days professional development. because I mean, I think that there's definitely, you know, I think that there will be quite a bit of online learning. And I think that 4 days is sort of like the minimum, you know, sort of, it's not really enough. You know, it doesn't help them, you know, they're not going to be able to find out how to use the smart boards and interface that with the Google Classroom and stuff like that. If they're just getting trained in Google Classroom, it's sort of, you know, I think it would be better to allot like more training, because 4 days is sort of like a minimal. It's you know, compared to, you know, just some teachers really not knowing how to teach online, and it is a challenge. It is a huge challenge as well. And I was going to ask that my second thing is, so I really know that 4 days is not enough training. But also I wanted to ask about the apps, and I was listening to what Mr. Nichols was saying earlier on about if someone has a temperature, you know, and I think that it would be important as well to specify where they go to get tested. Because I don't think there should be like a 24-hour stay at home, you know, if someone's got a temperature. They really, and I'm sure that Governor Cuomo will come up with some parameters around this, but, you know, even if not, I mean, I think the school should just, you know, tell the parents that they have to, you know, take their child and get tested, and not just stay away for 24 hours and come back. And of course, the temperature is quite a late sign, you know, of COVID. And also there's an app that I know a lot of schools are using, which asks the parents questions like every day they'd have to fill in this quick questionnaire. So I just feel like an alternative space. You guys also had an offer from, you know, to use alternative space. And I don't know if you talked about this earlier on. You might have mentioned it, but I only just sort of, tuned in not long ago. So alternative space, telling people they need to get tested, you know, otherwise I don't think they should be allowed back if they haven't been tested, if they can't, you know, come up with a clean result. You know, we really have got to be tough around that, because this is a, you know, deadly illness. And I think it should be treated as such in the school, and I'm sure that, you know, it is. I'm just saying that there needs to be some regulatory kind of controls on this, you know, when somebody has a temperature and stuff like that.
Thank you very much, Helen. Jeff?
Yeah, so let me just go through a few things consistent with what Helen recommended or recommends. We do have a questionnaire that parents are gonna have to fill out, and staff members as well, which speaks to questions that are consistent across all of New York State, not questions that were developed by the Sag Harbor School District. And in those questions, it speaks to whether or not you have had contact with anybody who's been exposed to COVID, whether or not you've had a fever the last 14 days, whether you've come from any state that's been identified by New York State in its travel advisory. And the answers to all of those questions then dictate stay away orders, if you will, that are far more lengthy than 24 hours. So in fact, people are required to stay home for extended periods of time and meet certain prerequisites before returning to school. And those protocols are described in detail in the health and safety portion of the safety plan that's been posted to the school website. So for more detail, certainly go read that. And then also included in the plan are in the appendix section are detailed community resources related again to what Helen had suggested regarding how people could get tested and where. And then there was one more thing that I didn't take copious notes. So there was one more topic that you mentioned, Helen, but I don't recall what it was.
It was alternative.
Alternative facilities.
Oh, alternative facilities. So as per my comments at the last board meeting, we have looked into tents and we have received bids to try to pursue putting tents on property. And along with that research, we also did research regarding what we would have to do or what districts would have to do in the event that we wanted to utilize additional space outside of our school facilities. So for instance, if we wanted to use a vacant building in town and we thought we could house a grade or two there, what we've found out, and I've talked to our attorneys about this as well, is that despite the language from the state encouraging us to look at alternative spaces, the protocols and regulations still require us to go through the Office of Facilities Planning and make sure that that there's code compliance in the buildings that we would like to utilize. And code compliance for anybody who's been involved in a school construction project is a pretty prohibitive hurdle to get over, because the building has to meet the code requirements for students to be in it. So if we just wanted to, for instance, with Stella Maris, the former Stella Maris, which now is renamed the Sag Harbor Learning Center, we had to go through a bunch of remediation and construction to bring that building up to code to be used by our students. And that applies to any kind of usage of any alternate facility.
Great, thank you, Jeff. Jeff, I just think it is important to point out to the public, you did say it earlier, but just to reiterate that the testing standards we have for students are also, there are testing standards for teachers, faculty, and other staff personnel that are in or around the building.
Correct.
Scott, do we have any other hands up?
We do. We have Gordon Trotter.
Hi, Gordon. Please unmute yourself.
Hi there. How are you?
Good. Please just give us your full name, Gordon, not your address, and you have 3 minutes.
Gordon Trotter. I've got kids in going into 9, 7, and 3. So I'm spread through the spectrum here. One of the big things that I'm seeing come out of this whole thing is in regards to air quality. I know Stella Maris in Southampton have put in new Hepa systems and using UV light for doing stuff. I'm wondering if you guys have addressed or looked at any of that. I sent an email to you guys earlier today asking about it. I think air quality is going to be a huge component in this. I think the touch surfaces are less important at this point based on the research that's going on. And I'd like to know if the school's looking at or doing anything in that regard with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Gordon. Yeah, Jeff?
Thanks, Gordon. Yeah, we were on this issue a couple of weeks ago, actually, recognizing that air quality was an issue. So there are really 2 mechanisms through which we can address the air quality issue in our buildings. And it's dependent upon what's in the facility, which is often related to when the building was constructed. So for the newer construction, there are univents in the classrooms that can exchange air from the outside in as often as 6 or 7 times an hour. So we could exchange the air every 10 minutes. For a lot of the older classrooms, those univents don't exist, and so you'll have to open windows, which we should be doing in the classrooms with univents as well. In addition to what I just talked about, the third way, it's really more than 2, the third way to address air quality is through the HEPA filter units that you talked about. And we've ordered 20 HEPA units with the UV light. We've received 10 of them, and 10 of them are on back order. And we've ordered 135 of the Dayton air purifiers, which have HEPA filters. And we've received 9 of those 135. So we're still waiting for 126 of them to arrive. So in sum total, we've ordered 155, meaning that there'll be 1 in every space in the building. both classrooms and office space. But to date, we've only received 19, and we're doing our best to get them in before school starts.
Thanks, Jeff. Scott?
Yeah, it looks like one more just popped up here. So hold on one second, please.
Great.
Yvonne?
Hi, Yvonne. Please unmute yourself.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, just please give us your full name, not your address, and you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
My name is Yvonne Rayo-Remy. I've been listening and I heard that we can't really push the date back any more than we already have, that there's a lot of concerns with testing and protocols. And I was wondering if it would be possible to start everybody from pre-K to anybody who would be going into the school, and in a hybrid situation that we could eventually move to more full day. But when we start, if we started with a hybrid situation, like the one that you proposed where 2 days would be one group, then we'd have the day in the middle for cleaning, and then we'd have 2 days for the other group, that would allow time for us to also learn how to do the remote learning, because parents at home, I think, are concerned with that, and we're not getting the training. So even if the school personnel have the training, the parents still have a giant learning curve to work with. That reduces the contact time as far as exchanging germs and that sort of thing. So we can slowly build up to having children get used to wearing masks, having that remote learning, and the children still would be able to go into school on the days that they go and discuss the problems that they're having face-to-face with the teachers, allowing us to problem solve a little bit more before we get into a situation where we're just thrown into that free-for-all again, which I know that's not what you're really going for, but I know as a parent, a lot of us felt like it was a free-for-all and we really didn't know what was happening. This would give a little bit of a buffer time without actually having the school closed for remote learning. So I was wondering if that's a possibility of something that we could do to ease our way into the school year.
Thank you. Jeff, you want to tackle that one?
I don't really have an easy answer for it. My initial recommendation that was made to the board was based on a combination of the recommendation from the American Pediatric Association, the Harvard School of Public Health, which basically, and I don't want to go through it again, but basically said that students aged 1 through 10, and this was an interpretation of a study that was done in South Korea that we talked about the last meeting. But students in grades or age 1 through 10 were less likely to suffer the serious effects of COVID and less likely to transmit, and that, you know, older students 10 to 20 were still less apt to suffer the serious side effects, but their transmission capability is congruent with the adult population. So in all of our models, we've prioritized bringing students back K through 8 for 2 reasons. Number 1, the science, and number 2, the economic considerations related to childcare. Is it a perfect scenario? And does it answer all of Yvonne's concerns or other parents who have similar concerns? No. But it's the recommendation that we came up with. And certainly we can consider what Yvonne's suggested, but in fact, we have run through those scenarios multiple times and considered it as an option and presented as of a week or 2 ago what we thought were our responsible recommendations.
Thank you, Jeff. Okay, any other hands, Scott?
We have 2 people who would like to ask additional questions if you want me to.
Okay, sure. 1 minute each.
Okay, first up is Gordon Trotter.
Hi, Gordon.
Hi, guys.
Name again, and you have 1 minute.
Gordon Trotter. Sorry, just following up on this, and I'm sorry if I've missed it already. Is there a school entry protocol that we're going to go through with regards to temperature testing and or what I take it no COVID testing, but what is that entry going to be?
So as it currently stands, the original plan that's on the website called for a questionnaire to be completed by faculty and staff every day. And those questions are not Sag Harbor specific. They came from the CDC and New York State Department of Health. And that's sort of a checklist that's supposed to identify whether or not you should be in a public setting in a school. And that is again going to be answered by faculty and staff and parents for students. The discussion that occurred earlier this evening was whether or not beyond that we should be asking or expecting the school to temperature check every student, faculty and staff member prior to coming to school versus the questionnaire. And different districts are approaching it different ways. Our original recommendation to the school was based on guidance from the CDC. But despite that, there are many districts who have opted to have school districts perform the temperature check. So that's something that the task force will be discussing on Thursday night as an additional measure.
Thanks, Jeff. Go ahead, Scott.
Okay, the name on the screen is Rachel D.
Okay.
Hi, this is Michael D. again. Just following up, Jeff, on this issue of the teachers union needing to approve any live stream instruction. Is there a date for resolution on that?
We haven't established a specific date. The first I heard of it, the concern was today directly.
Okay.
As per my comments, I think we have a very good relationship with our teachers union. And in fact, it was very flexible and productive, that relationship last year in the spring, enabling us to address things that unfortunately some other districts were not able to address as seamlessly. So I'm hopeful that we can try to get a resolution to this and some clarity in the next week or two.
And Jeff, if there are, a third of the families electing to remote learn, how will the district address the potential conflict between the families that don't want to send their kids to school, that don't want to live stream, if that's the if that's the final answer from the union? And that's it.
Well, just two quick comments. So there are many, many districts in New York State who are waiting for clarification from the governor as to whether or not they have to offer a remote option. So we decided very early on as a district that that was not something that we were going to wait for the governor to weigh in on. We've already made the decision to offer the remote option because it just seems like the right thing to do. But a lot of districts at this point haven't even settled that question. So I think we're in a good place with regard to the district making that commitment. I don't have an answer with regard to the equity issue which you raised, and I'm hoping that I can have a more comprehensive answer once I know where we stand with regard to live streaming, specifically in a situation that's not entirely remote.
Thanks, Jeff. Anybody else, Scott?
Yeah, we do have a new speaker, Tal Litvin.
Okay, Tal, please unmute yourself. Give us your full name, not your address, and you have 3 minutes. You have to unmute yourself, Tal.
Hi, Tal Litvin. I'd like to know if you guys have considered trying to hire any teachers for remote learning exclusively. I mean, being that, we're taking the proximity issue away, you might be able to get some really good teachers who are, geared towards online education exclusively, maybe from other markets or something like that to help us with the overflow.
I'm going to address.
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tal.
So as of now, we have not considered that option. We're in the midst of hiring the staff that we identified as being needed in the budget for 2021, and have actually tentatively held off on a few positions at this point, not knowing if some of those sessions or classes will run. But it's an interesting idea, and let me give it some thought.
Thanks, Jeff. I do think it presents a unique opportunity for us this year. So if you could look into that, that would be great. Thanks. Scott, do we have anybody else?
Yeah, I'm sorry. We just have others that just popped up. We have Susan Richardson.
Okay. Okay, Susan?
Hi, sorry, this is the first time I've ever done this, so I
Sure,
didn't
just
know
give
how
us,
to unmute myself.
no problem. Just give us your full name, not your address, and you have 3 minutes.
I'm Susan Richardson. Wow, every week I have something I want to comment about, and then it changes, and this is just crazy. I don't know how anybody can figure all this out. But I am thinking more and more that this is going to come down to remote learning again for you, remote teaching. Can you still hear me? Oh my
Yes,
God.
we can.
We can.
Okay. I can't see you anymore. And it's kind of like, as a parent, it seems like the burden has fallen on us a little bit more, well, maybe a lot more than ever before, to make sure our child has a well-rounded education, and filling in a lot of the gaps, I guess, that I just figure you have your hands tied with a lot of this going on. And I'm wondering, can we as parents have study groups, or like virtual study groups, or supervised study groups that are homes, where we supervise that they're definitely doing physical distancing? And if so, would the school be like willing to help us like get in touch with other parents that our kids have the same classes with in order to do that? Because I'm just seeing that I'm probably going to be battling a lot of isolation and like that sort of problem. But I know it'll be different now, but anyway, that's just my question. Like, it's a lot different than like seeing other parents at the school and like bumping into somebody and having a conversation. It's a lot different to like do an email or text to somebody. So I don't even know who's the other parents, and it just seems like we're going to be taking over a lot of that element of being the school at home. You know? So that's what I was just wondering, if the school could help us connect with each other, the other parents.
Sure. Jeff, can you tackle that to the best of your abilities on the fly?
So I think that, unfortunately, well, number one, let's say that I think you're accurate in that, you know, and I experienced this with my own high school child, that more falls on the family when students are not experiencing, the children aren't experiencing school in totality. So most definitely, I hear what you're saying. I do think that the school is very limited in doing the types of things that you're talking about in terms of setting up study groups and things like that. Because when you think about all the protocols and procedures that that apply to us administering a program here in school, it would be problematic from my perspective for us to facilitate something outside of school without those similar controls in place. So I think it would be pretty difficult for the school to step outside of its role as a school and then facilitate groupings outside of school that don't have those same protocols and safety rules in place. And we couldn't just rely on parents' willingness to say, hey, we're going to make sure that they're socially distanced and this and that. So I think it's problematic in that regard. And then secondarily, I think that we really have to keep an eye on, even if that were a hurdle we can cross, which I don't think it is at this point, there would be some concerns with the heterogeneous or homogeneous, whichever one is problematic. It would really be homogeneous nature of groupings. So we'd want to make sure that equity, if the school was participating in those study groups, was not compromised. In other words, that you didn't have all the high achieving students and the parents who were really involved in one study group that the school facilitated versus the have-nots or the kids who come from families who don't have as many interested people in education lumped into or grouped into another. So in that scenario, it sort of contradicts the role of the school being the equalizer in society. Now, I will say that if parents want to do that on their own, that's up to them. But I think the school's role is pretty limited in that regard.
I agree. Thank you, Jeff. Scott? Scott?
You there, Scott?
Brian, while we're waiting for Scott, could I ask a question that has come up just in the course of this conversation? Is that okay while we're waiting for him to return?
Sure, absolutely.
Jeff, two quick questions just based on the feedback we've gotten. One is that regardless of the scenario we have, parents are going to continue to have to play a larger, more active role. So are we considering hosting or identifying places or people who could host workshops for parents on how to best support their children under these new learning paradigms? Because it sounds like there are parents, and we've heard this at a couple of our meetings, who are looking for additional support on there's lots of articles written, but that's different than having a conversation. So that's just one question. And then the other is, because we're going to have some middle high school students most likely being remote more days than not, I think there's been an ongoing concern about their social and emotional connectedness and health. So if you could also speak to some of the things that as a district we're considering to support that. So those two kind of unrelated questions.
Yeah, so I think the first one is an excellent point. Both are excellent points, but the first one, with regard to how the school can support parents in supporting their children, that's something that we're going to be doing more of. And when I spoke before about videos that we're going to send out during the month of August, I think we'll be doing a lot of that as it relates also to how parents can best support their children. So I know Ms. Carriero ran a bunch of workshops for parents in the spring and even for students in terms of how to navigate the new learning environment more efficiently and more thoughtfully. So it's new for all of us, but to the extent that we can, we'll be doing more of those trainings, if you will. I also think that we're probably going to be having more conversations with administrators. In other words, more open dialogue, open-ended, where for those at the middle school, high school, I know Mr. Malone has his vehicles through which he addresses this, but at the middle school, high school, once we shut down, we went from, I think, once every month or so to once every week. So we'll be doing more of those meetings as well to try to assist parents, not only in answering their questions, but maybe offering assistance if we have the answers for them to better navigate things. And then the social emotional piece, you know, that's a real tough one. I'd like to say that I have a magic solution for that. I think it's, you know, throughout the spring, we did the best we could with outreach from our guidance department, from our administration, from our teachers. We had remote meetings with our teachers on a regular basis where we discussed kids and tried to identify kids who maybe weren't, who were really struggling, and how could we better support them. But I think when I hear parents talk about the lack of connectedness to school, I think we need to be even more creative. And if it means that we've got to come up with an alternative club for theater, for instance, which doesn't require students to be physically close to each other, then we've got to get creative in making that happen in a way that is still connects kids to each other and to the school more than what happened last spring. So we'll continue to work on that, but it is a tough one because that connectedness, even if the kids come to school, the physical distancing, the masks, the protocols, they make the institution such that connectedness is harder to achieve. And then it's even more so if students are studying remotely.
Right. Thank you. So I'm going to tee up just two ideas based on that. One is that as we think about, as a board, our committee structure, there may be some subcommittees that we want to have on an ongoing basis during the year that help bring some ideas to the board in these different areas that have a representation from what a traditional, committee would have, whether, it's staff, administrators, parents, so, and maybe even students. So that might be helpful. And secondly, I was really impressed at the level of participation we had to the survey that was conducted a few weeks ago, where within 2 days it was over 400 responses. It seemed like it was a high number, if I remember correctly. So I would encourage us to continue to use that as a mechanism. It's not necessarily scientifically projectable, but I do think it's an indication of where opportunity and concern exists. So as we launch this, these different areas where we feel like it's not as easy to have a turnkey solution, I think being able to no pun intended, but take the temperature of the room, so to speak, on an ongoing basis, the survey mechanism is going to be helpful as well, because the weekly meetings in the spring were great. I was able to attend many of them, but many parents couldn't. A lot of them are during the day. So a survey is just a parallel mechanism to get that important feedback.
Great. Scott?
Yes, we have Alicia's up next.
Hi, Alicia. Please unmute yourself. Give us your full name, and you have 3 minutes.
Hi, Alicia Sabirides. I'm the PTA president for the elementary school. Regarding those past comments, I would like to offer, I feel like the PTA could offer some social connecting resources for parents that might work. If the school cannot get involved, it might be a good solution for the PTA to have just a way for parents to reach out to us and connect, and we could potentially group people together or offer workshops or anything else that we could be of help for. Another comment, I just wanted to have some questions coming into my text as well as someone had a question. If Mr. Malone could answer, what are the details for the elementary school remote learning program for pre-K through 5th? Would it be similar to what we had? Maybe a more detailed explanation if people decide not to go to school starting September 14th. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Malone?
Yeah, I think just to kind of generally frame out our plan for elementary remote learning, based on the feedback that we've received since the spring, both from parents as well as the teachers, we want to offer direct instruction every day. So the whole group, whether it be at that grade level or by a class, they would receive direct instruction each day. There was also a lot of positives related to smaller group instruction across the grade levels and trying to give children opportunities in smaller groups, two to 5 students, to meet with the teachers on a daily basis. Part of the remote learning, no matter how we design it, there is going to be an independent piece. Students are going to be doing some independent learning. Obviously, at younger ages, they would need support from someone at home. So that's important to keep in mind. And then lastly, daily feedback from the teacher, as well as support given via what we had referred to as the office hours approach. So I think that kind of generally frames it out. I know there's been some really good points throughout the evening with regards to the schedule of the day and how that will look. And I think that's going to continue to evolve, but the key piece is to provide the structure for students. Students thrive when there's routine and structure to their day, and that's going to be a key component to our plan.
Great, thank you, Matt.
Okay, and we have Gordon Trotter.
Okay.
Gordon Trotter. Sorry, guys. Back again. Just wanted to ask with regard to, we're all focused on the parent side of it with kids coming back to school. Where's the teacher union and the teachers in regard to returning to school safely?
So
they spoke last week. So I don't know if we want to speak for them, Gordon. They're obviously supportive of going back in a safe environment, to paraphrase what they had said last week. And I'm sure we'll hear from them more going forward as we get closer to the opening and we decide on a plan by the 15th of this month. Jeff, you want to add anything?
No, I think that you pretty much covered it. I think they would also like to have the students come back. They had, they being the teachers, had a list of requests, which from my perspective were pretty reasonable. In other words, if someone had a teacher had a job that required close contact, that they'd be issued, personal protective equipment. They made requests with regard to cohorting students, which we've talked about. And they obviously want to see a safety plan that protects both students and teachers. But I think you pretty much covered that, Brian.
We'll update you, Gordon, and everybody as soon as we have some more information and direction from them.
Okay, Brian, we have Heather Harshstein again.
Okay. Heather, you can unmute yourself. You have
a minute. I only need a minute. I just have a question in reference to another question about the teachers, and I'm wondering, everybody keeps talking about the science and this and that, and how can we possibly consider returning to school in light of the actual numbers, which clearly indicate that students, especially at the elementary age, are at the lowest risk. And the number of COVID cases and fatalities in children is minuscule. So my question is, it seems as though the important thing here obviously is the safety of everybody. My own mother is in high risk myself. So I understand the risks. But it seems as though the people who are at more risk here are the teachers. And I'm wondering if we're looking at a situation where we have, pre-K through 12 with kids whose numbers statistically are so small, are we offering the high-risk teachers, perhaps, the teachers who have concerns about their own health and wellness? Are they being possibly given an option to teach from their home while the students who can come to school or that want to go to school sit in a room and are taught by them in that environment? I was just wondering if that is something that has been discussed with some of the teachers who are understandably concerned for themselves.
I can address that a little bit, Brian. So we have received some requests from teachers to be remote. Not a large number, a few. But there are pretty specific protocols and legal guidelines that speak to deciding who is entitled to an accommodation and who's not. And for me to get into the ADA, the American Disabilities Act, and in detail right now would take about probably an hour or so, if not longer. But I do think that in answer to your question, which is, are we considering it? The answer is yes, but we want to make sure that we are thoughtful and measured in how we proceed so that ultimately we're serving the students while protecting those people who have legitimate medical concerns.
Great, thank you, Jeff. And with that, I'm going to ask that we move on to item 5.3 on tonight's agenda, which is new non-resident tuition. Jeff, you did touch on this earlier in response to a caller, so perhaps you could just reiterate where the school is thinking and those dates, and then we can move on from there.
Yeah, so the goal really, to summarize very quickly, we have 47 new registrants since last year that are district residents. So an increase of 47 students. In addition to that, we also have 40 people who are on a waiting list, if you will, based on inquiries that they've made since last spring. In my comments before, basically 21 of those students are grades pre-K through 5, and 19 of those students are grades 6 through 12. Our tentative thinking is that 6 through 12 is easier to accommodate because of the cohorting issue, and at the elementary school, it's a little bit more difficult. But even within a specific school, you may have variability with regard to certain grade levels being able to accommodate additional students and others not. So tuition has always been something that the administrators sort of decide upon, and my intention is to work with the building principals this year over the next 2 weeks, and by mid-August, get in touch with those families who are on the waiting list and let them know where they stand. And the determination as to whether or not we're able to accommodate them will be based on our ability to do so without compromising our ability to social distance in a responsible way.
Thank you, Jeff. And just to be clear for the public that's listening, we're discussing new non-resident tuition in students, not existing non-resident tuition in students, which are included in the group that we're able to accommodate now, correct?
Correct. The 40 students that I mentioned that are on the waiting list, if you will, are inquiries made since last spring regarding new enrollment.
So for everybody watching, if you are a non-resident tuition student and currently, as of last year, attending Sag Harbor Schools, you can continue that at this time.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Any board questions on that?
Just one other clarification is also if you're a new family that lives in Sagaponack or Wainscott, we're contractually obligated to take all of those families on.
Correct.
At certain grade levels, right?
Correct.
At 4th grade up, yeah.
Yep. Any board questions?
I just have a question. Jeff, have we got an indication? Are these people a one-off? They're just here for the year, basically, and then next year they're going to go back to the city or wherever they came from? Or are they going to be, because, you know, every other student we have from out of district, they're pretty much committed here. You know, they come in and they stay, you know, pretty much for a few years or as long as, you know, they are. So I just wanted to get a feeling. Is this more like as a reaction? We're not moving back to the city and, you know, we just want to send our kids to Sag Harbor for the year and then next year we're back to the city, in which case I find it very disruptive. Or is it going to be like, you know, people that are more committing in like keeping their kids here. And then the second comment I have is, we have the big discussion about social distancing and how we're not going to be able to accommodate, especially the kids from the high school, on a daily basis into our school. So by adding all these kids from the outside, is really like a good thing to do. So that's all.
Okay, so with regard to your first question, Yorgos, it's tough for me with any degree of certainty to answer as to what these families' plans are more than 6 months out or a year out. My guess is, as you know, that a lot of people are out here because they don't want to be in the city, partially due to COVID, partially in the history there, but partially due to some tuition that perhaps they have to pay for private schools that will go remote this year. A lot of uncertainties. I would say that if the conditions on the ground improve between now and next year with a vaccine or whatever, and it's no longer a danger, perhaps you'll see some people move back to the city, but at this point it's speculation on my part. And then with regard to your second question, if you have 19 students spread out over 6 grades, you're basically talking about 3 students a grade. And I think you raise a legitimate concern, which is, do we really want to accept students if it compromises our ability to social distance? And as I said previously, our decision making the decisions we make will be based entirely on our ability to accept students in a way that we think does not compromise the safety of the students in the school.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Sandy, I think you had your hand up.
I do. I just want to say that I think it's going to be important this year for our new residents that have moved into our district that we follow up with the residency policy. I'm not sure that was ever finalized, or deal with our school resource officer to follow up that they are truly residents of the district as a concern of the public. And I think that's something that at this point, with people moving in and possibly tuition paying students, we need to take seriously and make sure that we do this with, full on honesty and transparency.
I think it's a good point, Sandy, and I'll look to put that on the agenda for the 17th. I think so we can have a discussion about it, and absolutely.
Thanks.
Any other board questions with respect to this item? Okay, moving on to item 6.1, administrators' reports.
So I think the administrator reports were just covered because
we did cover a lot of ground, I agree. If anybody wanted to add something else of the administrators, we're happy to hear it. If you've covered everything, then we can move on with our agenda. Sounds like we're good. We'll move on with our agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda items 7.1 to 7.24?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Victoria, please open up the voting.
Unanimous, thank you.
Great, and congratulations to everybody in there for tenure. Keep doing a great job. We appreciate your work. Moving on to action items. Action item 8.1. Is there a motion to approve? Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Board discussion regarding action item 8.1. Jeff, if you could just give us a little background. Seems like this person, based on the information we've received, is an excellent candidate and will be a great addition to the school. Didn't know if the board had any questions, and if not, you could just give us a brief synopsis and we'll open the voting.
Sure. Zoe comes to us from a private school in Manhattan where she's worked as an IB math teacher for a couple of years with more than a couple of years with an extraordinary history of results. She emigrated to the United States from China when she was 16. speaks 3 languages, attended the University of Vermont because she wanted to get out of the city where she earned her undergraduate degree. And we're really looking forward to having her join our department. We're really excited.
Great. Thank you very much. Victoria, if you could open up the voting.
That's unanimous. Thank you.
Great. Is there a motion on item 8.2?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Board discussion.
Just, you know, so sad to see so many teachers retiring this year, and, you know, wishing them all the best of luck. I know just between the teachers that retired at the beginning of, you know, that we learned about in May and June, and then now the second set, it's, you know, it's a huge loss for the elementary school in particular. And just, we'll miss you all.
Thank you very much for all your help and everything you've done here, Mary Ellen. We appreciate it. Okay, Victoria, please open up.
Jesus. Unanimous. Thank you.
Congratulations on retirement. Is there a motion for item 8.2?
So moved.
I'm sorry, 8.3. I read that wrong. My apologies. Thank you, Chris.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any board discussion? Okay, please open up the voting.
Can I just clarify, was that Sandy that seconded?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. That's unanimous. Thank you.
Is there a motion for action item 8.4?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any board discussion? Thank you, Ms.
Again, I just-
Brickback, for all your years of service to the school. It's greatly appreciated. Any other board comments?
I was just going to echo that for both these employees, that they've been very long-term in the district and have been part of the fabric of our family, our school family. And I want to thank them for all their years of service. It has made a huge difference.
And I want to thank Susan Rayback for bringing those ducks into our home kindergarten year. So that was a great experience.
Any other board discussion before we vote?
I echo the same thing, and we're going to miss them.
Absolutely.
That's unanimous. Thank you.
Okay, is there a motion for action item 8.5?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Board discussion. Please open up the voting. Okay,
That's unanimous. Thank you.
great. Item 9.1, committee reports. Are there any, I know it's been difficult to meet, are there any committee reports that any of the board wants to share? Otherwise, it's my belief, we will confirm it in the next few days, we'll be discussing committees on the August 17th meeting. And for the public, an email will be going out later this week requesting any interest from the public who would wish to serve on any of those committees, for the record. If the board doesn't have anything, then we can move on. Okay, hearing or seeing nobody.
Brian, can I just ask for a point of clarification on something?
Sure.
It's on 7.24. I know the answer to this, but I thought it'd be helpful for the public to know. Earlier this evening, we talked about that it's uncertain whether we're going to have a fall sports season. We don't know what sports we'll look at, but we did appoint coaches tonight. Could the superintendent just make a comment about what happens if a season doesn't happen for a sport in terms of those appointments?
So
absolutely, Jeff, please.
Sure. So the Sag Harbor School District last year, right off the bat with the Teachers Association, the majority of coaches come from the Teachers Association, came to an agreement really without much discussion, that people would only be, coaches would only be, coaches and advisors for that matter, these are co-curricular positions, would only be compensated for services rendered. So if for argument's sake, there were 60 days in a season and someone rendered 12 days, then you'd be entitled to 1/5 of the compensation that a full season would normally result in. So with regard to the appointment of the fall coaches, I see this as a proactive move in the event that we do open up for sports on the 21st. We appoint people retroactively. In the event that the season does not happen, no one will be paid for services not rendered.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you for bringing it up, Chris, and Jeff for clarifying that so that the public knows we're not paying anybody unless services are rendered. With that, and thank you for the bargaining unit for making those agreements last year. That makes things seamless moving forward. With that, we are on to item 13.1 on the agenda, which is our second public input. If anyone from the public would like to speak on the second public input. Scott,
See
any hands?
anybody, Brian? Nope.
Okay. Seeing or hearing nobody at the second public input. We do not have an executive session this evening, so we would be moving to item 15 on the agenda. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, Victoria, please open the voting.
That's unanimous. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for coming, everyone. Jeff, thank you, and administration and everyone from the public coming. Our next meeting is August 17th, unless something comes up before then, at which you will be notified.
But we will be updating our website where we have all of our COVID information if there's anything to be updated.
Yes, that'll be up.
Make sure the public keeps an eye on that on the website.
Good point, Sandy. Thank you.
Thanks.
Congrats to everybody that got tenure. So exciting.
And thank you to the public for continuing to ask really great questions and sharing your thoughts and ideas. It's very helpful.
Wonderful. Everyone have a good evening. Bye.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye-bye.